The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered if someone was looking back. They built telescopes. They sent radio signals into the void. They dreamed of meeting other intelligent life. They never imagined that other life had been watching them all along. The Galaxy Council discovered Earth long before humans learned to split the atom. 12 ancient species had formed this council over 1,000,000 years ago. They ruled the galaxy with careful hands. They decided which young species could join their civilization and which ones would be left alone to destroy themselves. When Earth's first radio signals reached their sensors, the council began their observation. They watched humanity fight 2 world wars. They watched nations point nuclear weapons at each other. They watched pollution spread across the blue planet like a disease. The council made their judgment early. Humans were violent. Humans were primitive. Humans were dangerous. But they were also useful. Their planet had resources. Their workers could serve in mines and factories across the galaxy. So the council decided to wait. They would let humanity develop just enough to be useful, but not enough to be a threat. For 300 years, Earth received nothing but silence from the stars. Then humanity built their first ship that could travel faster than light. The vessel was called the Dawn Runner, and it carried a crew of 50 brave souls. They launched from Earth orbit with the hopes of all humanity behind them. They expected to find empty planets and endless possibilities. Instead, they found a Velthari patrol ship waiting for them. The Velthari were tall and thin, with silver skin and eyes like black pools. They had been watching Earth's progress with growing interest. When the Dawn Runner appeared, the Velthari captain simply sent a message. "Follow us. The council wishes to speak with your kind." Ambassador Yelena Vasquez was chosen to represent Earth. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent 40 years as a diplomat, solving conflicts that seemed impossible, but nothing had prepared her for Station Meridian. The station was larger than most cities on Earth. It floated at the center of the galaxy, a massive ring of metal and light. Ships from 100 different species came and went, like insects around a hive. Ambassador Vasquez felt very small as her shuttle approached the docking bay. The council chamber was even more impressive. 12 platforms rose in a circle, each one holding the representative of an elder species. The Velthari sat with perfect stillness. The Korath, massive reptilian warriors, shifted with barely contained aggression. The Silurians, the oldest of all species, looked like trees that had learned to walk. Their ancient eyes studied the human ambassador with something that might have been curiosity. Council leader Vorath Prime spoke first. He was Velthari, and his voice echoed through the chamber like wind through a cave. "You are the representative of Earth," he said. It was not a question. "I am," Vasquez replied. She kept her voice steady, despite her racing heart. "Your species has achieved faster than light travel. This brings you under our jurisdiction. You will now hear our terms." The terms were not kind. Earth would be designated a provisional species. This meant they could trade with other civilizations, but only with heavy taxes. They could colonize new worlds, but only 3 systems chosen by the council. They could not build military vessels larger than patrol craft. They could not attend council meetings. They could not vote on any matter that affected the galaxy. In short, humanity would exist at the pleasure of the elder species. They would serve. They would obey. They would be grateful for whatever scraps the council allowed them. Ambassador Vasquez listened to every word. She asked questions about specific rules. She requested clarification on trade agreements. She behaved exactly as the council expected a primitive species to behave. "Do you accept these terms?" Vorath Prime asked when the explanation was finished. Vasquez looked around the chamber. She saw the Korath smiling with too many teeth. She saw the Velthari watching with cold calculation. She saw 100 different ways that humanity could be crushed if they refused. "We accept," she said. The council was pleased. Another primitive species had been brought into the fold. They would provide cheap labor and resources for generations. In time, they might even evolve enough to be truly useful. Earth returned to silence. For 50 years, Humanity did exactly what the Council expected. They traded goods at unfair prices. They built colonies on the 3 poor systems they were given. They sent their young people to work in alien factories and mines. They smiled and bowed and said yes, and thank you, and of course. The Council stopped paying attention to Earth. Why would they? Humans were just another primitive species learning their place in the galaxy. There were more important matters to consider. The Korath were pushing for expanded military powers. The Silurians were warning about some distant threat. Politics consumed the Council's attention. No one noticed what humanity was really doing. In secret shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, human engineers studied every piece of alien technology they could find. They took apart Velthari communication systems. They analyzed Korath weapon designs. They examined the ancient machinery of the Silurians. And then they improved everything. Human scientists worked in shifts around the clock. They asked questions that elder species had stopped asking thousands of years ago. They found solutions that seemed impossible. They built prototypes in hidden facilities on moons and planets that the Council had never bothered to survey. The young people who worked in alien factories memorized everything they saw. They reported back to Earth with detailed information about security systems, military formations, and political secrets. Every human in the galaxy became an observer, gathering intelligence that flowed back to Earth like water flowing to the ocean. Ambassador Vasquez continued to smile at Council functions. She continued to file polite protests that were always denied. She continued to play the role of a representative from a weak and primitive world. But in private, she received reports from Earth. She knew about the ships being built. She knew about the weapons being designed. She knew that humanity was preparing for something. She also knew that the Council would eventually push too far. Elder species always did. They had grown arrogant over millions of years. They had forgotten what it meant to struggle. They had forgotten that the quiet ones were often the most dangerous. Earth could wait. Humanity had learned patience through thousands of years of hardship. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed them. They could survive a few more decades of humiliation. The silence was not surrender. The silence was preparation. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, humanity was building something that would change the galaxy forever. Kepler's Reach was not a beautiful world. Its sky was the color of rust, and its winds carried dust that got into everything. The sun was dim and distant, and the winters lasted for years. But 12,000 humans called it home, and they loved it with all their hearts. The colony had started as a mining operation. The planet had deposits of rare minerals that were valuable in galactic trade. Human workers came to dig in the red soil and send their findings back to Earth. But workers brought families. Families built homes. Homes became communities. And soon Kepler's Reach was more than a mine. It was a place where children played in domed parks, and old people sat together watching the strange alien stars. Colony Director Marcus Chen had lived on Kepler's Reach for 20 years. He had watched the colony grow from a handful of tents to a proper city. He knew every family by name. He attended weddings and funerals and birthday parties. These were his people, and he would do anything to protect them. When the Council's message arrived, Chen read it 3 times because he could not believe the words. The Korath Dominion had filed a claim on Kepler's Reach. They said the planet's minerals were needed for their military expansion. They said the original survey had been conducted improperly. They said many things that made no sense. But the Council had ruled in their favor. Humanity had 30 standard days to evacuate the entire colony. Chen sent an immediate message to Ambassador Vasquez. She was already fighting the decision through every legal channel available. She filed protests. She requested appeals. She demanded extensions. The Council denied everything. The rules were clear. Provisional species had no right to challenge Council decisions. The evacuation began anyway. Ships arrived from Earth to carry people away from their homes. Families packed their belongings into small boxes. Children said goodbye to friends they had known their whole lives. The mood was heavy with grief and anger. But the people of Kepler's Reach followed orders. They were good citizens. They believed in the system. On day 25, the Korath fleet arrived. There were 12 warships in total. Massive vessels covered in weapons and armor. They looked like predators circling wounded prey. Their commander was a Korath named Thrakus, a military officer known for his cruelty and his hatred of what he called lesser species. Commander Thrakus sent a message to the colony. "We have adjusted our schedule. The evacuation will be completed in 5 days instead of 30. Begin immediate departure of all human vessels." Marcus Chen responded with calm words. "We are evacuating as quickly as possible. We have families with children. We have elderly who need medical care. We cannot move faster than our ships allow." Thrakus did not like this answer. In his experience, primitive species needed to be taught their place through force. He ordered his fleet to move closer to the planet. His weapons officers began targeting civilian ships. The transport vessel Horizon's Promise was preparing to leave when the Korath opened fire. The ship was old and slow. Designed for cargo rather than passengers, it had been pressed into service because there were not enough proper transports for everyone. Its passengers were mostly families returning to Earth. Parents who wanted their children safe. Children who were excited to see their grandparents. 61 young people were on board, heading home for the new school term. The Korath weapon cut through the ship like a hot knife through paper. There was a flash of light, and then the Horizon's Promise was gone. 342 people died in an instant, their bodies scattered across the void of space like dust in the wind. Marcus Chen watched from the colony control center. He saw the flash. He heard the screaming from other ships. He felt something break inside his chest. Something that could never be repaired. Commander Thrakus sent another message. This was a demonstration. You have 24 hours to complete evacuation. Any ship that remains will be destroyed. The galaxy expected humanity to respond with more protests, more legal filings, more polite requests for mercy. That was what primitive species did. They complained and begged and eventually accepted their fate. Earth went dark instead. Within hours of the attack, every human vessel in the galaxy began returning home. Diplomats left their posts without warning. Traders abandoned their goods. Workers walked away from their jobs in alien factories. The human embassy on Station Meridian emptied overnight. Ambassador Vasquez was the last to leave. She said nothing to anyone. She simply walked to her shuttle and disappeared into the stars. The council was confused. This was not normal behavior. Primitive species did not go silent. They protested. They pleaded. They accepted their place. But humanity had simply stopped talking. 3 weeks passed with no communication from Earth. Council observers reported that the planet was still active. Factories were running at full capacity. Ships were moving in unusual patterns. But no human would respond to any message. The Korath thought this was amusing. "They are hiding," Commander Thrakus reported. "They know they cannot fight us. So they run like frightened animals. Give me permission to pursue them to their homeworld. I will teach them the final lesson." The council debated but decided to wait. There was no hurry. Humans could not hide forever. Eventually, they would have to emerge and face reality. On Kepler's Reach, the remaining colonists were forcibly removed by Korath soldiers. Marcus Chen was dragged from his office and thrown onto the last transport. He did not resist. He did not speak. He simply stared at the Korath with eyes that held no fear, only patience. One young Korath soldier found this unsettling. "Why does he look at us like that?" he asked his commander. "Because he is stupid," the commander replied. "All humans are stupid. They do not understand when they have lost." But Marcus Chen understood something the Korath did not. He had received a secret message from Earth before communications went dark. The message contained only 3 words: "We are ready." Back on Earth, the silence continued. Cities functioned normally. People went to work and school. Children played in parks. Everything seemed peaceful. But beneath the surface, a great machine was coming to life. In hidden shipyards across the solar system, thousands of vessels received their final preparations. Weapons were loaded. Crews were assigned. Coordinates were programmed into navigation computers. The fleet that humanity had spent 50 years building was ready to move. In a secure bunker beneath the mountains of Switzerland, the leaders of the United Earth government met for the final time before the silence would break. They reviewed their plans. They confirmed their targets. They made peace with what was coming. President Elena Vasquez, sister of the ambassador, addressed the room. For 50 years, we have been patient. We have been quiet. We have been everything they expected us to be. But our children were murdered. Our people were humiliated. Our dignity was stripped away. She paused and looked at each face around the table. They wanted us to be silent. They wanted us to be weak. They wanted us to accept our place as servants in their galaxy. Her voice grew harder. They were wrong about us. And now, they will learn what humanity becomes when we stop being patient. The leaders nodded in agreement. The vote was unanimous. The orders were given. In 3 days, the galaxy would learn that Earth's silence had never been weakness. It had been the calm before the storm. The transmission arrived without warning on a quiet morning across the galaxy. Every communication system on every council world received it at exactly the same moment. Scientists later confirmed that this was impossible with known technology. Humanity had found a way to do it anyway. The message began with a simple image. Earth, blue and green and beautiful, floating in the darkness of space. Then the view pulled back, and the galaxy saw something that stopped hearts on 1,000 worlds. Ships filled the space around Earth, not dozens or hundreds, but thousands. Massive warships with sleek designs and weapons that glowed with strange energy, carriers that held smaller attack craft like mothers holding children, support vessels and troop transports and orbital stations bristling with defensive systems. The fleet stretched across Earth's orbital space like a metal forest that had grown overnight. The Velthari High Command immediately began analyzing the footage. Their experts worked for hours before delivering their report with shaking voices. The weapon systems are based on our designs, they said, but they have been improved. Significantly improved. Their shields use Korath principles, but are 40% more efficient. Their engines combine Silurian and Velthari technology in ways we never considered. The report spread through the council like poison. For 50 years, humanity had been studying every piece of alien technology they could find. Every trade good, every piece of equipment in the factories where humans worked, every system on every ship that humans served on. They had taken the best ideas from every elder species and combined them into something new. But the ships were only the beginning of the message. The second part of the transmission showed documents scrolling across screens, intelligence files, secret communications, private records that should have been impossible to access. The Velthari's hidden clone armies, bred in secret facilities against council law, the Korath commanders' private messages mocking the council they claimed to serve. The Silurians' desperate attempts to save their dying son. Political scandals, secret treaties, lies and corruption stretching back centuries. Humanity had spent 50 years watching, and they had seen everything. The final part of the transmission was a woman's face. Ambassador Yelena Vasquez looked into the camera with eyes that held no anger. Her voice was calm and steady, like a doctor delivering a difficult diagnosis. To the Galaxy Council and all member species, she said, for 50 years, humanity accepted our place in your civilization. We followed your rules. We paid your taxes. We worked in your factories and mines. We smiled and bowed and did everything you expected of us. She paused, and something cold entered her expression. On the 25th day of our evacuation from Kepler's Reach, a Korath warship destroyed the civilian transport, Horizon's Promise. 342 of our people died. 61 of them were children. Images appeared beside her face. School photos. Birthday parties. Graduation ceremonies. The faces of the 61 young people who would never grow up. You killed our children, Vasquez continued. You thought us primitive, weak. Beneath your notice, you believed we would accept this crime, as we accepted every other humiliation. You were wrong. The images disappeared, replaced by a simple document. These are humanity's terms. You have 30 standard days to accept them. The terms were clear and non-negotiable. First, Earth demanded full membership in the Galaxy Council with equal voting rights. Second, humans would have unrestricted colonization rights beyond their current systems. Third, Commander Thrakus and all officers responsible for the attack on Horizon's Promise would be surrendered to human justice. Fourth, reparations would be paid to every family who lost someone in the attack. Fifth, a formal public apology would be broadcast to every inhabited world. The transmission ended with a countdown clock. 30 days remaining. Station Meridian exploded into chaos within hours. Representatives from every species demanded emergency meetings. The Korath ambassador declared the transmission a forgery and demanded immediate military action. The Velthari called for calm, while their intelligence services tried to understand how their secrets had been exposed. The Silurians said nothing at all, which worried everyone more than shouting would have. Council leader Vorath Prime called for order. "This is clearly a bluff," he announced. "Humanity does not have the resources to threaten the Council. They have built some ships and gathered some intelligence. This is an act of desperation, nothing more." But private conversations told a different story. Military commanders compared the human fleet to their own forces and did not like what they found. Intelligence officers realized that their networks had been compromised for decades. Politicians discovered that their secrets were no longer secret. The Korath responded first, as everyone expected. Commander Thrakus himself appeared before the council, his scales dark with anger. "I will not surrender myself to primitives," he declared. "Give me permission to destroy Earth itself. We will burn their world to ashes and scatter the ashes across the void." "And how do you propose to reach Earth?" asked a Silurian elder, her voice like rustling leaves. "Their fleet is larger than yours. Their weapons are superior. Their defensive positions are prepared. We have allies," Thrakus growled. "The Council has 12 species. We will combine our fleets and crush this rebellion together." The Silurian's ancient eyes studied him with something like pity. "You still do not understand," she said. "This is not a rebellion. This is a correction. Humanity has been patient for 50 years. They could have been patient for 50 more. But you killed their children. You woke something that should have been allowed to sleep," Thrakus snarled. "You speak as if you fear them." "I speak as someone who has lived for 3,000 years, the Silurian replied. "I have seen young species rise before. Most destroy themselves before they become a threat. But some survive. Some learn. Some become something greater than their origins." She turned to face the full council. "Humanity is such a species. They have been watching us, learning from us, preparing for this moment. And now they offer us a choice. Accept them as equals, or discover what happens when patient beings lose their patience." The debate continued for days. Voices rose and fell. Alliances shifted and reformed. The Velthari calculated odds and possibilities. The Korath demanded blood. The smaller species watched in terror, knowing that their fate depended on decisions they could not influence. On Earth, humanity waited. The fleet remained in position. The countdown continued. Ambassador Vasquez received daily updates but sent no further communications. The silence had served its purpose. Now it served a new one, letting the Council understand that humanity would not negotiate, would not compromise, would not accept anything less than their full demands. In a small apartment on Earth, Marcus Chen watched the news reports with tired eyes. He had been evacuated from Kepler's reach and returned to a world preparing for war. But he felt no joy at humanity's show of strength. He could only think of the 342 people who had died, the children who would never grow up, the families who would never be whole again. His granddaughter sat beside him, a small girl of 7 years. She had lost her best friend on the Horizon's Promise. "Grandfather," she asked, "why do the aliens hate us?" Chen thought for a long moment before answering. "They do not hate us," he said finally. "They simply never saw us as equals. They looked at us and saw servants and workers. They never imagined that we could be anything more. But now they know? Now they know. The girl nodded seriously. Good. Maybe they will be nicer now. Chen pulled his granddaughter close and hoped she was right. But he had seen the look in Commander Thrakis's eyes. He had heard the contempt in Korath voices. He knew that some beings would rather die than admit they were wrong. The countdown continued. 25 days remained, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, fleets began to move. The council chamber had become a battlefield of words. Representatives screamed at each other across the room. Ancient alliances crumbled overnight. The Velthari blamed the Korath for causing this crisis. The Korath blamed the Velthari for being too weak to control primitive species. Smaller species tried to stay out of the crossfire, while secretly preparing for whatever came next. Commander Thrakis refused to wait for the council to reach a decision. On day 12 of the countdown, he gathered his fleet and launched toward humanity's nearest colony, New Singapore. New Singapore was a beautiful world of islands and oceans. 3 million humans called it home. The colony had no military value, but Thrakis did not care about military value. He wanted to teach humanity a lesson. He wanted to show them that their fleet meant nothing. He wanted blood. The Korath fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. 47 capital ships. 200 support vessels. Enough firepower to reduce a planet to burning rock. Thrakis stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Vengeance, and smiled with too many teeth. Send a message to the colony, he ordered. Tell them they have 1 hour to evacuate. Then we begin bombardment. His communications officer hesitated. Commander, our sensors are detecting something. What do you mean? Something? Before the officer could answer, space around New Singapore began to change. Ships appeared from behind moons and asteroids and orbital stations. Human warships, dozens of them, weapons already charged and targeting solutions locked. They had been waiting in the shadows, hidden and silent, as if they knew the Korath were coming. They had known. Human intelligence had tracked every Korath ship movement for weeks. They knew exactly when and where Thrakis would attack. They had prepared accordingly. Admiral Sarah Chen commanded the human fleet. She was the daughter of Marcus Chen, and she had joined the military the day after her sister died on the Horizon's Promise. Her voice carried across all human ships. Calm and steady. All units, engage at will. No prisoners, no mercy. Remember our fallen. The Battle of New Singapore began. The Korath fought as they had always fought. Their ships charged forward in aggressive formations. Their weapons fired in devastating volleys. Their commanders shouted orders based on traditions thousands of years old. They expected the humans to break and run. Primitives always did. But humanity did not fight like elder species expected. Human ships moved in coordinated groups, each one supporting the others. They did not seek honorable combat or individual glory. They attacked weak points with overwhelming force. They retreated when necessary and counterattacked from unexpected angles. They used tactics that seemed chaotic but followed precise mathematical patterns. The Korath flagship Eternal Vengeance came under attack from 5 human vessels at once. Its shields, considered impenetrable by Korath engineers, failed within minutes. Admiral Chen's ship, the Horizon's Memory, delivered the killing blow. The massive Korath warship broke apart in a storm of fire and metal. Commander Thrakis escaped in a life pod. He watched his flagship die and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Around him, the battle continued. Korath ships fell one after another, their communications filled with confusion and panic. Captains called for reinforcements that would never arrive. Officers abandoned their posts. Soldiers who had never known defeat learned what it felt like to lose. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 47 Korath capital ships had been destroyed or disabled. Humanity had lost 3 vessels and 212 crew members. Each loss was felt deeply. But the victory was complete. Admiral Chen sent a message to the surviving Korath ships. Leave this system. Return to your homeworld. Tell your leaders what happened here. Tell them that humanity is no longer patient. The Korath retreated in shame. News of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. The mighty Korath, the military enforcers of the Council, had been crushed by a species they considered primitive. It seemed impossible. It changed everything. Council leader Vorath Prime called an emergency session. His voice shook as he addressed the representatives. The situation has changed. We must reconsider our response to humanity's demands. The Korath ambassador, his scales pale with shock, tried to protest. This was one battle. We have more ships. We have allies. We can still win this war. Can we? Asked a Velthari representative. Her voice was cold with calculation. Our intelligence services have been compromised. Humanity knows our secrets, our weaknesses, our military positions. They have spent 50 years preparing for this conflict. We have spent 50 years ignoring them. The Silurian elder spoke again, her ancient voice filling the chamber. I have watched many wars in my long life. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have learned to recognize when a conflict is already decided. She turned her ancient eyes toward the Council. This war is decided. Humanity has won. The only question is whether we accept their terms peacefully, or whether we force them to impose those terms through more bloodshed. The debate continued through the night. Some representatives wanted to fight, others wanted to negotiate. The smaller species began quietly sending messages to Earth, offering to support humanity's demands in exchange for protection. On day 20, the Velthari formally withdrew their support from the Korath military alliance. They released a public statement acknowledging mistakes in the Council's treatment of humanity and calling for peaceful resolution. It was not an apology, but it was a crack in the Council's united front. On day 25, 3 more species announced their support for humanity's membership. The alliance against Earth was crumbling. Commander Thrakus, humiliated and desperate, tried one last time to rally support for war. He appeared before the Council and made a passionate speech about honor and duty and the danger of surrendering to primitives, but his words fell flat. No one wanted to fight a war they would probably lose against an enemy that already knew all their secrets. On day 28, the Council voted. The result was not even close. 8 species voted to accept humanity's terms. 2 voted to continue negotiating. Only the Korath voted to fight, and even their vote was split. The military faction wanted war, but the civilian government had seen enough. They overruled their own generals and joined the majority. Council leader Vorath Prime sent a message to Earth. The Galaxy Council accepts humanity's terms. We request a meeting to finalize the agreement. Ambassador Vasquez responded within the hour. We will meet on Station Meridian in 2 days. Commander Thrakus will be surrendered at that time. The apology will be broadcast as agreed. There will be no further negotiation. On Earth, the news brought celebration but not joy. Too many had been lost. Too much had been suffered. Humanity had won their place in the galaxy, but the victory tasted like ashes in many mouths. Marcus Chen received the news in his apartment. His granddaughter sat beside him, watching the celebrations on the view screen. We won, grandfather, she said. Yes, Chen replied quietly. We won. Are you happy? Chen thought of his colony taken away. He thought of his neighbors killed by Korath weapons. He thought of his daughter, Admiral Sarah Chen, who had fought because she could not bring her sister back. I am relieved, he said finally. I am proud of what we accomplished. But happy? No. War does not make people happy. Even when you win, his granddaughter nodded seriously, as if she understood. Perhaps she did. Children who have lost people they love often understand more than adults realize. The countdown ended. 30 days had passed, and the galaxy would never be the same. Station Meridian had never seen so many ships. Vessels from every council species filled the space around the massive station. News drones broadcast images across 10,000 worlds. Beings who had never cared about galactic politics stopped their daily lives to watch. Everyone understood that something important was happening. Ambassador Yellen Vasquez arrived on a human shuttle that was deliberately simple and unimpressive. She could have come on a warship. She could have made a show of force. Instead, she chose to arrive as she had 50 years ago. A small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, dressed in simple diplomatic clothes. But everything else had changed. The council chamber was configured differently this time. Instead of 12 platforms looking down at a single speaker, 13 platforms stood in a circle at equal height. The 13th platform, made of dark wood from Earth's ancient forests, waited for humanity's representative. Ambassador Vasquez took her place without ceremony. She looked around at the representatives of the elder species. Some met her eyes. Others looked away. The Korath delegation was notably smaller than usual, and Commander Thrakis was nowhere to be seen. Council Leader Vorath Prime opened the ceremony. His voice was formal and careful, like a man walking through a room full of sharp objects. We are gathered today to welcome humanity as a full member of the Galaxy Council. For too long, Earth was designated a provisional species with limited rights and representation. The Council acknowledges that this designation was inappropriate. He paused, clearly uncomfortable with the next words. The Council also acknowledges that actions taken against human civilians at Kepler's Reach were unlawful and immoral. We express our deepest regret for the lives lost and the suffering caused. The words were not quite an apology, but they were as close as the Council could manage. Vasquez listened with a neutral expression. She had negotiated this statement, word by word, over the past 2 days. Every sentence represented hours of argument. The ceremony continued. Documents were signed. Seals were pressed into official records. Humanity's status was officially changed from provisional to full member. The colonization restrictions were removed. The trade taxes were eliminated. Everything that humanity had demanded was granted. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. A door opened at the back of the chamber. Korath guards entered, escorting a prisoner in energy chains. Commander Thrakis walked with his head down, his scales gray with shame. He had been stripped of his rank and his honors. He was no longer a military hero. He was just a murderer facing justice. Ambassador Vasquez stepped down from her platform and approached the prisoner. She stood in front of him, this massive Korath warrior who had killed 342 of her people. And she said nothing. She simply looked at him until he finally raised his eyes to meet hers. "You thought we were beneath you," she said quietly. "You thought our lives meant nothing. You thought you could kill our children, and we would simply accept it." Thrakis said nothing. What could he say? "You were wrong about us," Vasquez continued. "But I want you to understand something. We did not do this for revenge. We did this because no species should have to fear that their children will be murdered by those who consider themselves superior." She turned to address the full council. Humanity does not want dominance. We do not want to replace the Korath as military enforcers or the Velthari as political leaders. We want what we have always wanted: to be seen as equals, to have our voices heard, to be treated with the dignity that every intelligent species deserves. The chamber was silent. No one had expected this. They had expected anger and threats and demands for submission. Instead, they heard something that sounded almost like mercy. "We will work within this council," Vasquez continued. "We will follow its rules and respect its traditions. We will contribute to the peace and prosperity of all species. But we will also remember what we learned during our 50 years of silence." Her voice hardened slightly. "We learned that patience is our greatest strength. We learned that observation is more valuable than confrontation. And we learned that when patient beings finally act, they act with purpose and precision." She returned to her platform and sat down. "Humanity is no longer silent, but we remain patient. We hope the Council will give us no reason to be otherwise." The ceremony ended shortly after. Commander Thrakis was taken to a human ship to face trial on Earth. The other representatives filed out of the chamber in quiet groups, talking in low voices about what they had witnessed. The Silurian elder approached Ambassador Vasquez before leaving. Her ancient eyes studied the human woman with something like admiration. "You could have destroyed us," the Silurian said. "You had the power. You had the justification. Why did you show mercy?" Vasquez thought about the question for a long moment. Because mercy is what separates civilization from barbarism. Because our children died for a better future. Not for revenge. Because we want to be remembered as builders, not destroyers. The Silurian nodded slowly. We have lived for 3,000 years, she said. We have watched species rise and fall. Most young species that gain power use it to dominate and destroy. You have chosen differently. 1. Wins. We have chosen what we hope is wisdom, Vasquez replied. We may be wrong. We are still young. We are still learning. That is exactly why you are wise, the Silurian said. Those who know they are still learning are always wiser than those who believe they have nothing left to learn. In the years that followed, humanity took their seat on the council. They participated in debates. They voted on important matters. They sent diplomats and traders and settlers to worlds across the galaxy, but they never forgot their 50 years of silence. Human representatives became known for their patience. They listened more than they spoke. They observed carefully before acting. They built relationships with younger species who faced the same condescension that humanity had once endured. When the Kelleri, a newly discovered species, were threatened with provisional status, it was humanity that argued for their rights. When the Marathi were denied trading licenses, it was humanity that challenged the decision. When smaller species needed protection from larger ones, they often found that Earth was willing to help. The Council changed slowly, as large institutions always do, but it changed. The Korath military was reformed. The Velthari loosened their grip on political power. The old arrogance that had defined elder species for millions of years began to fade. Not everyone was happy with these changes. Some longed for the old days when their species held unquestioned authority. Some resented humanity's rise and plotted in shadows. But they were minorities, and their voices grew quieter each year. On the 20th anniversary of humanity's council membership, Ambassador Vasquez gave her final speech before retiring. She was old now, her hair white, and her movements slow, but her eyes remained sharp, and her voice still carried weight. 20 years ago, she said, humanity demanded to be heard. Today, I am proud to say that we are heard. We are respected. We are equals. She looked around the chamber at representatives from 13 species. But I did not come here to celebrate our achievements. I came to remind us all of something important. She paused, letting the silence stretch. We must never forget why this change happened. It happened because children died. It happened because arrogance led to atrocity. It happened because those in power forgot that every species, no matter how young or weak they seem, deserves basic dignity and respect. Her voice softened. Let us honor those who died by building a galaxy worthy of their sacrifice. Let us create a civilization where no species is dismissed as primitive. Let us remember that the quiet ones, the patient ones, the ones who watch and wait, may be the most powerful of all. She stepped down from her platform for the last time. Earth was silent for 50 years. We hope we never need to be silent again. The chamber erupted in applause from representatives of all species. In that moment, something remarkable happened. The galaxy felt, for the first time, like a true community. Marcus Chen watched the speech from his home on Earth. His granddaughter, now grown with children of her own, sat beside him. They had watched every anniversary speech together for 20 years. She was amazing, his granddaughter said. She was human, Chen replied. Just like the rest of us. She was patient. She was wise. She remembered what mattered. He looked out the window at the stars that humanity had finally claimed as their own. That is all any of us can hope to be. The galaxy continued to turn. Stars were born and died. Species rose and fell. But humanity remained, patient and watchful and wise. They had learned the lesson of their silence, and they would never forget it. Silence was not weakness. Silence was preparation. And when Earth finally spoke, the galaxy listened. Forever.